Hello and welcome to the Liverpool Connection podcast. I'm Daz. I've got Steve with me as always, and I've wanted this guest for a long time, just because his books are amazing, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But it's Simon Hughes from The Athletic. Hiya, Simon.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just feel like we just had like a half an hour conversation. We should have just taped it.
Yeah, should we just go over it again? What we just spoken about?
Yeah. So, obviously, Liverpool supporter. What does Liverpool FC mean to you?
Well, I mean, I think the first point really is it's the point of entry for football. And when I think about how sort of I grew up, the whole direction of my life was around football, and for as long as I can remember, going back to sort of late 80s, bit sketchy memories of that period, but going into the early 90s, I can vividly remember pretty much every football match I've been to or played, or, so Liverpool, was like, I was an only child as a kid, and my dad was a Liverpool fan, season ticket holder, going back in the 70s, and then when they had me, my dad stopped going, because he sort of wanted to focus on being a dad. So, like, my dad has actually, he played in Liverpool's like sort of youth teams. I know like everybody sort of claims that in Liverpool, but he was in the B team when Shankly was there. So he constantly told me about, this story about how he was close to greatness and all that, which is obviously a bit exaggerated. But and yeah, it was the early 90s, so there wasn't football on TV all the time. So the only way of sort of getting involved with Liverpool was either by going or by watching it on tape, as it was then. So yeah, for me it was like, I love I'm into all football, but it was the entry point for that sort of passion, really. But then as I've got older, I've sort of come to realise, Liverpool Football Club is more than just a football club. I know that's a cliche, but it's a representation of the city itself, and the way people feel about themselves is linked to that, in the city, like in a way that I think is unique because of the city's history and the way it's viewed not so positively in other parts of Britain anyway. So yeah, it's pretty all consuming, really. Like I wake up every morning, it's probably amongst me first thoughts of what's going on at Liverpool. I mean, now it's a job. It's obviously, you can't switch off from it at all, really, even when you're away on holiday and stuff like that. But it's it's like sort of the brother that I never had, I suppose, like that presence of interest and interaction. It's pretty overwhelming when I think about it.
Do you remember your first Anfield experience?
Yeah, that would have been Coventry City in '91. I think it was the 1991 season. And my dad took me. He wouldn't take me in the copy. He took me in the paddock, which was the old section down at the bottom of the main stand nearest to the Kop. So I remember we were like really low, so I couldn't really see much of what was going on, to be honest, because all the players seemed huge. I just remember, like a lot of people, it was the colour of the grass. Even though when I look back at the footage of that match, the pitch seemed terrible, but at the time, by the standards of pitches in the early 90s, it looked majestic, you know what I mean? So, yeah, and I just remember sort of feeling, even though I was dead close, feeling quite far away, because I felt quite small in relation to everything else that was going on. I mean, it was sort of an overwhelming experience because of the power of the crowd and the number of people who were there, and like the roar of Anfield. Really, I think Liverpool won 1-0, but it was like sort of going into that period where Liverpool turns into like a team that was like so far away from where it should be. So like it was weird for me, and obviously a lot of people my age, in the 90s was a pretty, well, it was obviously barren, really, in terms of success. Not barren, but they obviously never reached the expectations of the club. And I always felt like, jealous of, older people's experiences of the club compared to what I was I was going through. So Yeah, Coventry 91, I think it was. Because I remember, obviously, their kit as well. Their kit sort of stood out, the sky blue kit. And it was a day match. I remember it must have been a Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock.
It's always like great to remember, your first match. I always remember mine because mine was 76, so I'm a lot older than you. I just turned 50. I just turned 50. So yeah, mine was 76, and I'm so happy that Steve has got to go, because a lot of Americans won't ever be able, to get over, because it's expensive. But it's just an amazing feeling. That first match just draws you in, and then you just fall in love with the club.
I mean, my most, I've got to be honest though, the most excited that I've been was when I started going by myself. The first experiences of, I suppose, not being accompanied by my dad so much, because there's obviously a bit of freedom attached to that. So, like, I must have been, I don't know, I think I must have been 11 or 12 the first match when I went by myself. I mean, football has already gone into that transition whereby if it was doing that 10 years earlier, it would have been chaotic, sort of all, terraces on the Kop and stuff like that. But I was sort of in the main stand, and it felt a bit more organised at that point. I mean, I did stand on the Kop. I must have been 10 or 11. It was a game when they drew 2-2 with Swindon Town. Swindon, like the worst team that's ever been in the Premier League, I think, until Derby County in 2007. Swindon were just awful. Liverpool had absolutely destroyed them when they went down and played at their place earlier on in the season. Swindon came up to Anfield and got a 2-2 draw. I think Mark Wright scored the header. I just remember thinking, fuck, just my luck this, like Swindon. I remember being like being sat on the crash barriers, and it was quite, again, it was quite intimidating. Like, I was like quite reasonably tall for my age, but, at that time it was, the sort of the power and the sway of the crowd, it was overwhelming. I think it must have been the last season of the Kop. It must have been.
Yeah, I think it was. But yeah, it's just that when you're able to go by yourself, you just feel all Billy Big Balls. I remember, I was finally, actually I went without me mum and dad knowing. So I went with my mates, and but as soon as I got back, obviously they knew because I had my scarf on, so I got a good walloping. So I probably deserved it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I remember I think one of the first night matches I went to was one of the Man United games, I remember. And I can't remember the score, but I just remember the sense of, like, intrepidation, really, because United were flying. And Liverpool always did all right tended to do all right against them at Anfield. I know they dropped a few big, they had a few big defeats against them at key moments, sort of in the middle part of the 90s. But the games that I seem to go to against United, they always seem to sort of raise the game. And I'll be honest, I did grow up with an absolute loathing of Man United. That sort of rivalry thing has gone from my spirit in some ways. I like it, I'm fascinated by it, but I don't like sort of feel that sense of anger as much as it's more, I feel more positive about the team that I support rather than a hatred towards another team now, just because I just think there's too much of that in football. So I just think the whole sort of rivalry thing, I think it divides a lot of sort of working class people who should have a bit more in common. That's why I was like sort of pleased the other day. Andy Robertson was saying about Marcus Rashford, he should get a round of applause or something at Anfield. And I wouldn't be surprised if that did happen eventually. I think Liverpool crowd would do that. I genuinely do. They'd probably start booing him afterwards in a comical way, but you know what I mean? I think that sort of thing, it's just been lost a bit in football, the whole Twitter thing, just it does my head in, to be honest. So I try not to partake in that anymore. But when I was a kid, I was full of like hatred for all things that were anti-Liverpool, basically.
Oh yeah, but it's it's just different now because you have all the keyboard warriors, just screaming back at you, and you're just like, how old are you? You got 40-year-old men just having a go. It's like at the end of the day, just support your own team and don't bother about anybody else.
Well, that's the big thing. Like when you go to Anfield now, like the majority. I mean, when I say now, it's been forever. It's been the case, but like the teams that have done the best against Liverpool and Anfield over the last sort of 4 or 5 years have been the teams where the supporters have got behind their own team. So, like, Crystal Palace are an example of that. I've never heard, for a London team, I've never heard them sing like any anti-Scouse songs or anything. They always get behind the team, and I think it actually really does help the team. Well, because the Liverpool players aren't bothered about singing about, Merseyside and unemployment, are they? It's like, it's not going to affect them. So you might as well get behind your own team and try and help them win. I just don't get it. Tottenham are pretty good for that as well, I must say. Like, you get it, sometimes you hear it a little bit, but they by and large get behind their own team. And, they haven't, I don't think they've won at Anfield for a long time, but they put up some good performances over the last sort of 5 or 6 years under Pochettino, certainly. So I just think that would be better. It'd be better for the atmosphere inside stadiums. I don't think singing about the opposition adds to the atmosphere at all. I think it dilutes it. So, yeah, that'd be my message to other fans. Because I think Liverpool are good. I know they every now and again they'll target a player or sing some songs, but most of the energy, the creative energy, is with their team. And I think I'd like to see a bit more of that in football.
Yeah, that's why I liked, when we played United, there wasn't much, banter going back and forth. And then when we did, we're going to win the league. That's all. That's all that needed to be said. You didn't have to say that. Go, fuck off, United. Any of that. It was just like, we're going to win the league, and then they shut up.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, that was. I must say as well, United, I think, they get behind their team. They're away fans. I think when I listen to them, they sound great. They properly have a go. They're getting behind United. They have an impact. I always, and at Old Trafford, I know everybody says, well, Old Trafford lost its atmosphere, but I always think, particularly when they play Liverpool, like they get behind United's 100%, and you've got to give them credit for that. But that game, that when we're going to win the league, I mean, I know obviously everybody's lost something throughout this pandemic, but like, I will always carry that memory, with me, because the job that I do now, it's not so much match focus. So being able to go and just watch the games, a bit more, and I've got access to a season ticket. So yeah, I mean that particular week, my wife had just given birth, like sort of 6 days before, and I was able to get out and go to the match, and I was absolutely drained. I'd had no sleep all week, and when Salah scored, I almost collapsed on the floor with like this emotional energy. It was mad, because I'd written this big long piece about Salah. I'd gone to Egypt at the end of November and written a big long piece about Mo Salah's life in Egypt. The idea was to recreate the journey that he used to take from Nagrig to Cairo every day, and try and really bring it to life for the reader, I suppose. And we've been sitting on this piece for like ages, like waiting for the right time to put it out, and Salah just for some reason had stopped scoring every time we were going to do it. So yeah, that was a bit of a relief. And then obviously just the whole week was just brilliant. It felt like I know Liverpool have had sort of the upper hand over United for a few years now, but it did feel like there was 30 years of frustration bellowed out, and it was a definite release.
Seeing Alisson like run the whole length of the pitch, and it seemed like just a massive release from the cop. It was like a cork going off from a champagne bottle, and it must have been incredible being in there, just watching on the telly over there. I was just like, yes, finally, shove it in their face. But I think that was more for Liverpool supporters themselves, not even really to have a go at United. It was just
I don't think so. I think it was like, you don't need any excuse to sing that song, do you? And I mean, I just still feel that sort of regret that there hasn't been that moment obviously since clinching it, where everybody's been able to pile in and do it. And I'll be honest, like for me, like you know, they obviously deserve champions and all that, but it does feel like, for me personally, that something has been lost, you know, throughout, you know, the enjoyment has been lost because of what's going on. But, you know, obviously, when you talk like that, it sounds selfish, and I understand that, but you can't escape from the fact that, you know, I'm not alone. Like, a lot of lads who my age will have thought I'd had those whole summers mapped out, you know, being in Liverpool, being out partying, even as a dad. But it was so obviously that's been taken away a little bit. But I mean, I was quite fortunate in the end, because they're only letting a certain number of journalists into matches now. And as I said, I'm not really doing so much match coverage, which shoots me down to the ground. So in a weird way, like when they lifted the trophy after the Chelsea game, I was able to spend it with like 3 or 4 of me, you know, really close mates who I probably wouldn't have been able to spend that moment with if it had been working, or even if it had been inside the ground, because you're sort of all separated or not there, you know what I mean? So that was good. That I'll always remember that, you know, I'll never forget that moment. So yeah, I think I've spoken to a few lads who sort of match goers who feel similarly about that particular moment, that it was great that we could actually spend it with people that we care about, rather than sort of people that we're sort of put together with, you know, in the course of a match.
Yeah, because I think, you know, you'd lose that moment, like you said, with your mates. And, you know, me and Steve were going to come over, you know, for the last match of the season and for the parade. So that put a massive damper in things, because I just feel like, yeah, we've won the league, but until, you know, they have that parade, I just feel like it's kind of lost a bit of its shine.
It's funny for me, because I don't think about the parades that much for some reason. I always think about that moment at the final whistle, you know, when the scenes are just, you know, indescribable, the final whistle and the reaction. I mean, I've spoken to a few people about this, but the closest thing that I've had to it so far was when Liverpool played Wolves on the final day the season before, and obviously Brighton took the lead against City, and honestly, for 90 seconds, I was doing the match report for the Independent on that game, and I was just like, oh my God, this is actually happening. I'm getting goosebumps now just talking about it, like, it's actually going to happen. And then within 90 seconds, it was wiped away, you know, but you could feel like there's something about a football stadium, a full football stadium, which is really powerful, I think, and to not have those sort of photographs embedded into your head, you know, what it's actually like. As I said, it's something has been lost, but, you know, the promise and the sign is that I don't think this team's going to go away anytime soon. So hopefully, you know, part of me also wondered, like, if this eventually happens, you know, what is there to look forward to in some ways, you know what I mean? So at least there's that one thing that, you know, we still haven't, you know, a lot of people still haven't experienced, but whilst also getting the 30 years out the way, because, you know, obviously, if these have been so far ahead and the season would have finished, that would have just been pretty unbearable.
That's funny, because I was actually at the Sandon pub that day.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah, and the damn tellies went out.
Oh, really? Right,
yeah. So there was must have been about 500 of us. They had a little about maybe a 20-inch telly behind the bar. We were all piled in a corner, watching it, and then Brighton scored. Beers went everywhere, and it was just mad. You know, people just singing, "We're going to win the league," and then, as you say, 90 seconds later, City scored, and it just went. Went back to being normal, just people getting drunk. So that was amazing.
Well, that month. I mean, I don't know whether anything will ever beat that month in terms of the excitement and the sort of the tension, all the things that you associate with a football match. Because remember, after that game, I know you've had Neil Jones on, haven't you, who's a mate of mine, and after they didn't win the title, and me and Neil, obviously Anfield, it was a nice sunny day. You know, it felt obviously very flat coming out into the pubs, and me and Neil ended up getting going back to the pub, which is close to his house in Litherland, and I ended up, we had a long chat over quite a few beers, felt really flat, and I remember walked home from Litherland, which was probably about an hour and a half, 2 hour walk, just thinking, it's just never going to happen. This, just wait's going to go on forever. But then you contrast that with the feeling in Madrid after, to win it in Madrid was for me was personally quite a big deal for a number of reasons. And I mean that was just brilliant. And obviously Barcelona, I haven't even spoken about that. I mean, I'll never ever forget that. Like, there's so many stories attached to that. I mean, my wife, she's from like a family of Evertonians. She's not really that fussed about football, to be honest. But she's sort of become more of a, she wants Liverpool to do well because she knows it's obviously good for me, really. But I remember that night, after everything that happened, like, I'll just never forget this, coming in to the house and like opened the door, and she'd gone to sleep. She was pregnant at the time. And like, she was like, what was the score? Whispering. This is like 1 o'clock in the morning. I still hadn't done any of my work because my head was just gone. And she was like, what was the score? And I said, oh, it was 4-0. And she was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I was like, no, they won 4-0. Honestly, she jumped out of the bed. I was like, she couldn't get to sleep then. She wanted to watch everything that has happened. And I mean, I didn't get to sleep. I think I ended up having a few strong gin and tonics, a couple of beers, ended up writing my piece, and then got to sleep for about an hour that day before I had to get up again and start work. It was just brilliant, brilliant memories.
Yeah, as soon as we won that, I actually had to go to the airport because I was going home, and I'd had too many pints, and thank God the plane was delayed.
Oh, right, yeah. I needed to sober up a bit.
Yeah, well, not really. Just drank some more. but it was funny because our stewardess was a Chelsea fan, and she wasn't too happy with us.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But she kept. But by about 4 hours, she started giving us more bev. So she's all right. You've got to
carry on, keep the party going.
Yeah. Steve, I know you've got some questions for Simon.
Yeah, Simon, good morning. We really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Similar to when James Pierce came on, I have this fanboy attitude about it because, I just love reading the work, the articles that you put out, you look forward to reading them. And I know for you, we kind of mentioned it before the show, that to be able to go to the Athletic in 2019 kind of really offered a different type of professional experience for you on writing about Liverpool instead of just doing match day reports and doing a short form analysis. So can you kind of help our viewers and maybe talk about why that decision was made to go over there and how your experiences since you've been there? Since it seems like they have put quite a bit of effort to expanding their football coverage with you and James and Raphael over there as well. So
yeah. Well, I mean, my editor at the I used to write for the Independent, so I had sort of quite a loosely defined responsibilities there, where it was not just covering Liverpool but Merseyside football generally, and then a little bit further afield. And my editor there was Ed Mallion, who you might be familiar with. He sort of led the charge with the Athletic basically when they went into a big recruiting drive. So I remember, Liverpool played Barcelona away in the Champions League, and I was over there to cover the game for the Indy, and I found out that Ed was leaving, and I was a bit worried, to be honest, because when there's changes like that, it can mean changes for staff, and I didn't really know what it meant for me, and I was obviously a bit worried about it. Obviously, Liverpool then got battered in Barcelona, so it wasn't the best couple of days. But I got back, and Ed was just like, look, he said, don't worry about anything. And I was like, why? And he's like, well, there's something happening, and I want you to be a part of it. So that was, I mean, he didn't reveal anything at all. He just sort of, that was it, left me hanging. I was like, well, okay, let's see what happens. So as it turned out, I don't know whether James has told you this story, but me and James were invited down to London. It's funny because James phoned me up and he was like, do you know this fella called Ed? He's I don't know, he's promised, he's doing all these things with something called the Athletic. And so we both basically established that we were both being sort of interviewed, I suppose, for this new project, which very different to sort of traditional English media, I guess, where, as you said, I mean, I was, around that period particularly, my focus really was around the matches. So I did pick up on the fact that, particularly at the end of that season, Liverpool playing 2-3 games a week minimum, and I found myself, I was doing very little writing about journalism really. I was sort of offering my opinion about the match, but there wasn't much time for anything else just because of the schedule of the fixtures. And although it was amazing doing that, being at the matches, brilliant, I was thinking, ultimately it's just my opinion. We spoke about it before. A match report is just an impression of what's going on. And it's very important to do that, of course, but I just sort of was thinking about the balance between my work schedule. And anyway, obviously I'd sort of had this, had us all down in London and a big presentation. And it was basically trying to recruit both of us, to come and work for the Athletic and front up sort of the Liverpool coverage. Although my responsibilities again are a bit more, they're a bit more loosely defined in the sense that I can, do other clubs and other things. But Liverpool being such a big draw, obviously I find myself going back doing a lot of Liverpool coverage and helping James with his sort of more. I suppose he is sort of a bit more match led, but he doesn't just do match reports. I guess he's a lot more than just that. So yeah, that's sort of how it all mapped out. And over the last year, really, I've had the freedom to go and to sort of write about some things that I just wouldn't have been able to do in the past. So the first big sort of project really was when the Athletic launched, and I went over to Boston to meet various people connected to the owners and try and really understand who FSG are and explain where they're coming from and sort of shed a bit of light on certain people who are behind the operation who maybe most supporters might have not known too much about. And it was brilliant. 5 days in Boston, brilliant city. Absolutely loved it over there. It was when Liverpool's pre-season tour was there, and obviously there were matches going on, but I wasn't really working on the matches. It was all sort of very much focused on that task, which was great. Yeah, obviously since then, as I said before, been to Egypt to do a big thing on Salah, went over to San Sebastian to do an interview with Xabi Alonso and spend a day with him. All these sorts of things. Like in traditional journalism now, there's not really the finance maybe to go and do that level of coverage for those very specific jobs. So it's been great. I've absolutely loved working there. That sort of a lot of freedom with ideas. If you've got a good idea, they encourage you to go and do it. But it's obviously changed in the last 6 months because obviously there's restrictions on what we can and can't do in terms of movements. But I've loved every minute of it. I never really saw myself as a just doing one. Sort of one thing around football. I always wanted to do, not obviously Liverpool's incredible football club, but write a bit more about not just the football, but the social side of it. And there's plenty of room for that with the Athletic. So, yeah, that's a pretty long answer to a very, very good question.
No, it's funny. We just had Chris Pajak on prior to this, and he does say hello. He knew you were coming on afterwards. And we had also talked about that Boston trip. I was fortunate enough to be up there as well for that weekend. And I know sometimes it's hard for supporters in Liverpool proper to understand the level of passion that the American fans have, the amount of money that they pay to even go to these, glorified scrimmages, or, friendlies here in the States and, traveling all over. Did you get a kind of feeling of just the level of the support that that outside of Liverpool, just this club, it seems to exponentially grow on a daily basis?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was in Boston for 5 days, and I think James, he followed them around on the tour. So I think he was in Ohio maybe before. I think that was the leg before, and then he went to New York afterwards. So I didn't see those two games there or the reactions in those cities. Although I guess in New York it'd be pretty hard. There's certain cities in the world where when there's a football match on, it. The whole city feels like it's gearing up towards that. And in Boston, I felt that. It felt like on the match day, in the days leading up, obviously it was sort of business as usual in Boston. But certainly on the 24 hour period before in the match day, it felt like there was something going on. You're suddenly seeing a lot more red on the streets and people wearing shirts and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was one of the funny elements was obviously James, obviously with his job at the Echo, is obviously very well known in across the world. Really, I've been to quite a few cities with him where you'll just get stopped in the street by somebody from and the other side of the planet who recognise him. It's like I always wind them up about being one of the big draws of Liverpool, and that was the thing in Boston. I mean, there was huge passion for the team. One thing that I did notice particularly was it's Liverpool seems to have a younger supporter base in America. I think somebody was explaining to me how obviously the coverage of football or soccer has grown a lot into the sort of the Saturday morning culture of young Americans. So it felt like there was a much younger supporter base for Liverpool there. Over the last the coverage of football in the States has increased just to the point where Liverpool have started to be successful, and there's a lot of interest around that. Obviously, they've got American owners, they've got an incredible manager who really charismatic, who people are naturally drawn to. So it does feel like Liverpool are like sort of making big strides in America. I mean, obviously, I wasn't there that year, but when they played Manchester United, there was one of the biggest attendances ever, I think, for a match.
I was there at that one too. That was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I think Man United possibly, it's hard to define, isn't it? But I think United are probably still ahead of Liverpool. But Liverpool are catching up and possibly might, if they're able to continue the culture of success and gain more supporters. I mean, people are very knowledgeable as well. That's the one thing that I took away from it. The people, not just in America, but other parts of the world. The sort of the global, as you said, that people spend a lot of money to come to Anfield, and they don't just want to come and watch the football. They want to understand the city a bit more and the culture of the city. And I think that's really important. That particularly to the local fan base, they want. I always think, without being too mushy about it, like Liverpool as a city, it's not somebody else. I'm actually pinching somebody else's quote, so I apologise for that, but it is true. It's not where you're from, it's where your mind's at. It doesn't matter, because Liverpool is a place of immigration full of everybody who's got different backgrounds, different big Irish population, and it's a sort of an outsider's sort of place. So I've always felt this idea of being Scouse, it's a mixture of lots of different things. So it should always be welcoming new people, but I think it's really important that like sort of the education of the club and the culture of the city remains important. And I'll just finish on one last thing. I think the one really good thing about Liverpool is, over the last few years, that the fan culture that exists has been allowed to breathe naturally, and the club have done a better job of embracing the natural fan culture rather than trying to create this idea of a fan culture and embed it into what they want the club to look like. They've allowed sort of the younger fans who might organise events and like boss nights and boss I don't know if they've been to any of them, that they've really sort of gone big now, and it's just people are getting to understand Liverpool a bit more rather than it being just sort of a club that appeals to everybody. It's sort of I always think it's the lesson of Michael Owen, isn't it? You don't want to appeal to everybody, because then you matter to no one, really, I think. And I think more people are getting to understand Liverpool a lot more than maybe they were 5-6 years ago, I think. And that includes America, Norway. I know in England there's like sort of people, other fans sometimes have a bit of a laugh about the Norwegian fan base, for example, but they're some of the most knowledgeable fans, that I come across. Like, they know everything about Liverpool. They understand, I guess, the sort of the nuances of the city's sort of political state and certain things that have happened in the club's history. They get it, you know what I mean? They really do get it. And I think that I saw a lot of that in the States as well. A lot of people who were sort of getting involved a bit more with the culture around the club.
Simon, it's interesting because we kind of referenced pre-show that Darren and I, we want to bring stories about this football club, not just talk about games, and obviously you're a big storyteller. And it seems like with the success of Jurgen Klopp's his time that he's been there, more and more people are learning more about the past history of the club, because there's that that connection where they're calling him, Bill Shankly, and just kind of linking the generations, right? And one of the things that we always try to tell people, to go and do some history about the club itself, but also about the city. And I know that even though you've written so many books about the Liverpool, the club, one of the books that you wrote titled "There She Goes," about the city itself between I think 79 or what were the years, 79 to
79 to 93
to 1993. Yeah. That was a very important part of the makeup of the current city, and just how the transition from the politics and the social structure of the time, and how that affects today's club. And I was wondering if you can maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad that you like that book, because for me, I've obviously written a few Liverpool books, which were, they've been a great opportunity for me in terms of establishing, I suppose, some sort of reputation, and developing my understanding of how to write and everything else. When I started the other series, the Red Machine series, which was, I started writing that book 10, 11 years ago. I was, a younger person, different writer, lacked experience. They've been great.
Your beard was shorter too.
Beard was short, yeah, very fresh faced. That's been a great platform for me, but they are pretty simplest. They're very simple in terms of the sort of the just straight interviews. And had I had more time to really think about what I was writing, I'd probably, on reflection, maybe write those books a different way. Whereas the book that you mentioned, There She Goes, I spent a bit more time on it. I was sort of a bit more experienced, hopefully a bit more knowledgeable about what I was writing about. And I think everybody who writes a book always looks back and wishes, could have done this differently, could have done that. But I'm pleased that I wrote that book, because I think, as you said, it's sort of, there's a connection. Everything's connected in Liverpool: football, politics, music. It's all connected in some sort of way, in the way Liverpool feels about itself and the way people feel about Liverpool as well. So it was the first non-football book. It's obviously a book that examines a massive change in Liverpool's city, the city itself, as the reputation that it had. Before '79, I think people sort of, there was a fair, everybody had an opinion about Liverpool, but it sort of, it certainly, by the end of that period, '93, the reputation of the city had changed, possibly forever. I don't think it'll. I think it still struggles with some of the events of that period. So, I covered the rise of Thatcherism and the impact that had on the docks, and there was a heroin epidemic. There was the riots in Liverpool 8. There was the rise of militants. There was Heysel. There was Hillsborough, and then it finishes, on a very dark moment, I guess, and which people might not make the connection, but I sort of think there is a connection between all these events. That there was a murder of a young 2-year-old boy, James Bulger, which happened just down the road from Goodison Park. So it's an incredible period in the city's history, which I think has changed sort of the way people view it, particularly, and it's been trying to fight back ever since, really. The unfair media representation of the way things are. I always remember when, although I was born in 1983, so it's funny city, Liverpool. I think some people who lived through that period probably think that they should have written that book, but I've sort of written it from a journalistic point of view and sort of a more reflective point of view, I guess.
Sorry.
I always remember sort of when in 1993 I would have been 10 years old, and I remember that particular event has a big impact on me, really, in terms of thinking about the dangers out there and everything else. And but the one thing that I really remember is the way Liverpool was being portrayed on the news and in the written press, because I did read quite a lot of the newspapers even at that age, which is a bit mad. But I always I still live in Crosby, which is quite a middle class area of the city, I guess. So I am sort of detached from the sort of harsh realities of urban life, but I played football to a reasonable standard for a decent team. So it meant that we'd go into lots of different places in the city, and I encountered lots of people, younger lads my age, from different parts of the city, which weren't doing quite as well, I suppose, at the time. And I just remember thinking, this doesn't sort of reflect what I see on a daily basis. Just like these extraordinary events, which, you know, should never have happened. But, you know, so I wanted to examine, you know, I've sort of flipped the arguments a little bit in this book, where it's like, well, you know, everybody was blaming Liverpool for various things, but the reality was it was a bigger sort of societal issue, really, that had been inflicted on the city and lots of the country. But, you know, Liverpool tends to bite back hardest when they see injustice and certainly unfairness. I think that's the one thing about Liverpool as a place. I think that if people see something that's unfair, no matter what it is, they don't just stand there and let it happen.
Yeah.
You know,
it was one of the reasons why that is so interesting to me, because, you know, I grew up in Detroit. So when I was growing up, it was maybe the fourth most populous city in the United States. Now it's not even in the top 50. So, you know, when you talk about like managed decline and Thatcher, you know, us here in the United States, you know, when we saw Thatcher on television, we thought, man, she's up there with Reagan, and, you know, she's this. And then you start learning more about the history of Liverpool, and you're like, man, this is not, you know, what you see today. It's come a long way, and I think it's, you know, so important that people that are fans of Liverpool, the club, you know, obviously you want to know the history of the football, but you should also know the history of the city as well.
It's really interesting you say that, Steve, because I've got a book that I've not long read called, well, simply Detroit by Charlie the Duff.
Yes, I read that.
I don't know whether you read it. You know, it got me thinking a lot about Liverpool and the direction of Liverpool as a city. There's huge parallels between Liverpool and Detroit in terms of the cultural offering that both cities offered to the countries, and its strategic and industrial importance. You know, obviously, you know, Detroit's incredible place with incredible history. It seems to me from the outside looking in that it's just being allowed to. I mean, I understand there's certain people who are responsible for things that have happened there, but I don't think governance has fought hard enough for that city, you know, and I felt the same with Liverpool, and I think Liverpool could easily have gone the same way, really. You know, I mean, Detroit's I think I'm right in saying a much bigger city in terms of population than Liverpool, but, you know, so maybe the challenge was even greater. I don't know, but not every city is exactly the same, is it? But there are amazing, you know, huge parallels. You know, Liverpool was a beacon of capitalism, really. You know, in the early part of the 20th century, and I guess you would say the same for Detroit in terms of how important that the car industry was and various other things. You know, so it's I found that really fascinating. Yeah, it's a really good book. If any American listeners haven't read it, I really recommend it.
You know, I think you kind of tend to forget sometimes as a football fan, because the club was still, during that time of that time period that you're writing about, they still had, you know, successes. I think they won like 7 league titles in those years. And so I would imagine being in the city that had some kind of release or escapism for the general population there.
Well, it did. I mean, lots of people have said to me, you know, without football, you know, in that period, you know, they don't know where they would have been, really. I mean, Liverpool was, you know, imprinted. You know, it's like, you know, I think in Britain, you know, if you grew up in the early 90s and somebody mentioned Lebanon, you have a certain view of, you know, Lebanon straight away. You know, it's not a negative one. It's not a positive one. It's a negative one. Liverpool is the same. You know, that people from outside the city view Liverpool in a certain way. You mentioned Liverpool, and there's certain things that you can't escape. And football, you know, I think a lot of it stems a bit as well out of jealousy, because, as you said, Liverpool Football Club and Everton Football Club were so dominant in that period. I mean, I think it was 9 titles, is it, between them in the same decade? Just incredible, really. 8 titles, wasn't it? So, yeah, I mean, Liverpool, whilst it was really suffering off the pitch, it was on the pitch. It was thriving. But I always think that the one big sign of sort of the way things were in the city, I know football had like sort of was suffering from hooliganism and everything else, but the attendances at Anfield throughout that decade, even though the team was doing so well on the pitch, dropped dramatically. People, started not being able to afford to go. This is when football was affordable as well. You know what I mean? If you look at the attendances when Liverpool won multiple leagues, the average attendance was really badly down. And the same goes for Everton as well. They won league titles, and Goodison wasn't always full. So it shows you like sort of what was going on behind the scene. Sort of on a social level in the city. And I think as well, I've written about Heysel in the There She Goes book, and it's quite, a difficult theme to write about, I think, because, Liverpool, the only reaction that Liverpool could have possibly given really is one of contrition and understanding it, and of, to be apologetic for what had happened. And everybody, unfortunately, if you were from Liverpool, were tarred with the brush of, what happened on that night, which I don't think as a club and as a city, it still struggles to escape from that. But I just feel that there's a lot more room for some context in that discussion as well, which in the book I've sort of tried to get into to hopefully make people understand why certain events happened on that night. And it's, just to underline, it's just a really chaotic period in the city's history. It was always in the news, Liverpool, and rarely was it in for the news for the good reasons. It was always for the bad. And the only thing that sort of was positive really about Liverpool was the two football clubs, I think.
And you kind of carry it forward to now. It seems like FSG and the executive team there, they have they're making a conscionable effort, right, to be a bigger part of the community, just revitalizing the area around Anfield. Obviously, the Anfield expansion is a different subject, but it seems like they're very involved in the community aspect of it. And maybe it's just the individuals that we have on the team, but it seems like it's a structured type of process from the club itself.
Yeah, well, I think they certainly get a hard time, FSG, from big sections of the fan base. But I think that, to be honest, I just think that if you're an owner of a football club, really, of Liverpool Football Club, you're always going to have a hard time. I think even when, when they were successful in the 80s, I don't think the fans necessarily had a really high view of the board. You know what I mean? I think the fans would have thought of the boards as being old men, businessmen who didn't really care about football, if that conversation ever happened. But clearly the conversation has accelerated to an understandable level, I guess, because these guys have bought the club off the back of, bad owners who obviously led the club in the wrong direction. But I think they've done a really responsible, they've tried to push the club forward in a really responsible way, which is what you don't really see too much of in football. And because it's been a gradual progression over a long period of time, it's been difficult to see the sort of progress in some ways, the small progressions that have happened to the club. And, they still make mistakes from time to time. There's PR issues which flare up. The trademark issue, which I'm sure you're aware of, happened just after the Champions League final. I was just like, oh, can't they just... I don't want to be writing about this. And I thought surely they've learned now that that's probably not the best thing to do. But that said, that the club's financial position, I think, under them will always be in a pretty healthy state. They've appointed an incredible football manager who, for me, deserves all so much credit for doing what he's done. I mean, we could talk about him for an hour, I'm sure, but as owners, I think what they have done, as you said, they've tidied up Anfield. They've given a level of certainty about the club's future as well, in the sense that, the ground issue is sort of hanging over Liverpool for 25 years, really. And it sort of created a lot of instability in the actual area of Anfield, because people didn't know whether they were going to move, whether they had to sell the house so they could build. Now they're staying at Anfield, you know what I mean? They built the stands. It looks incredible. It's stayed true to the atmosphere of the ground. So yeah, I mean, I think they've done a really, really, really good job, and that doesn't mean that they don't deserve criticism from time to time. That's the way it is. That's the way it is if you're a football club owner. It doesn't mean that they get everything right, but they've been really, really, really good owners, responsible owners who've made some big decisions. If you look at the club now and the position that it is in compared to what they inherited, it's taken a pretty long time to get there. But in football terms, anyway. But it's in a good place at the moment. I think that this summer's been another another summer of sort of criticism because of what sort of how long it supposedly took to sign Thiago. But the signs that I was getting from inside the club was that A, he wanted to sign, B, Bayern were willing to sell him, and Liverpool wanted to sign him. So when you've got that combination of three influences, you're pretty confident that it'll happen eventually. But added to the fact that Bayern were in a Champions League final, added to the fact that he was on holiday, I think Liverpool weren't in a particular rush to get the deal done in many ways. So yeah, I mean, I think he'll kick the team onto another level. And I was speaking to somebody else about this morning, and you just think, he's the sort of signing that I think was been beyond Liverpool for decades. He's a spectacular signing, and I think they're smart. Behind all that, the owners being, the owners deserve credit for creating the environment which has led to the engineering of that move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people or fans, they think it's as simple as just taking your checkbook out and writing a check and say, here you go, give us our player. There's a lot of structure at that level of finance. It's just not as simple as being a transaction, right? There's a lot of things involved.
It's not. I mean, the pandemic has hit Liverpool hard. That is true. I mean, it's not that there's a big lie about that. It's true. I mean, Liverpool's ownership are obviously very wealthy people. The billionaires who they could afford to dip into their own pockets, I guess, but they're of a different level of wealth to some of the people that they're competing with. I mean, they're competing essentially with obviously oil barons and, dare I say it, people from significant positions within national governance. I have to be careful how I say that, but so it's a totally different sort of level of finance, and they choose to run the club in this way, that they want it to be self-sustainable, that they don't want to sort of outstretch themselves, and it's worked for them. Under Jurgen Klopp, it's worked for them. So why would you not sort of trust the judgment? I mean, my concern was that the Klopp obviously made it abundantly clear that he wanted to sign a forward, and it looked for a while like they weren't going to be able to get a player in that position because of. But then obviously clearly, since the Werner deal fell through, there's a bit more clarity on the way forward. I realise we're still in a pandemic, and it feels this week that we're going backwards a bit, but at least there's a lot more understanding of the landscape now, which is why I think they're able to sort of make the level of commitment that they made. But equally, the commitment that they've made for Diogo Jota, who they signed this week, who I think is going to be a very good signing. He's not going to require the level of finance that it would have immediately for Timo Werner. So there's all these things that come into play, and I think that I hate the discussion around it, to be honest. It's become very black and white. Well, if you say you've been good owners, that means that you're automatically some sort of sympathiser. That's certainly not the case. I mean, I've called FSG out on a couple of occasions on some of the things that they've done. That doesn't mean that I don't think that they're good owners. It's just the way it is. Everything's become very black and white and very binary now in any discussion. I happen to think that they're very good owners who occasionally, doesn't mean that they make all the right decisions all of the time. But yeah, the club's in as healthy a position as it could be, really. I think under the current regime.
I know Darren wants to ask you a question, but I had one more question, Simon. This team, it seems like there's so many different storylines. You had mentioned earlier about going to Egypt and writing the story about, Mohamed Salah and how his upbringing, his path to, stardom. Sadio Mane has a, just as great a story as that. And do you have, in your mind, is there a new book coming out? Do you have a subject in mind?
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I mean, the requirements of the job that I'm doing, at the moment, it doesn't leave a great deal of time for book work. I mean, I'll probably park the books for the time being, I think.
Okay.
I mean, there are other people, I think, bringing out books this year about sort of Liverpool's rise. I just sort of feel that I've got to put my energies into the job that I'm being asked to do. And as I mentioned before, become a dad this year. So it's like trying to fit everything in is quite tricky. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll return to doing a few more books in the future. But it's just at this time, I'm very, very happy. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I started doing the books really because, not just because of the career. There was a financial reality to it. I mean, I wasn't earning great money,
right.
And the books aren't massive money makers, but they do obviously contribute to a certain level of income. So
sure.
I'd sort of thought, well, it's a good chance to just get the pay rise that I never get. You know what I mean? Because in the last sort of 15 years since I started in journalism, it's just been nothing but cutback. So it was another way of sort of developing my own experiences whilst earning a slightly, a little bit of money, which might pay for a holiday or something. You know what I mean? So yeah, at this moment, I just want to sort of focus on the Athletic and really try and produce as much good work as I can. And then
that'll give us everybody time to catch up on all the books that you've already written. So
well, yeah, hopefully, yeah. I mean, they're still in circulation. Obviously, I mean, There She Goes book, funnily enough, is out in paperback now and available on Amazon. So that's back in circulation. It only released, I think, last week. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of football in there, but it's not just about football. So people listening are sort of keen to know a bit more about the city. It'd certainly obviously be made up of people could buy that. But then there's 3 other books, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and then this decade. I don't know what we call the 10s. I'm not sure, but so yeah. There's 4 books for people to still get out and buy if you sort of want a catalogue of interviews with people that you may not have heard of too much over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm sure There She Goes will hit the bestsellers after our millions of subscribers learn about it. So
let's hope.
Yeah, go ahead, Daz.
Now, I know you've talked before on other podcasts of, the title Where She Goes. Obviously, John Power, the Lars. Why did you choose that title?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, the book, the title of that song was about heroin. Really, I mean, it's one of the great mysteries of the Lars. What was the meaning behind that title? And when I went to interview John Power, he wouldn't sort of admit it, but he sort of did. He wants Lee Mathers to sort of go on the record to explain what it was because it was his song. So I thought it's obviously related to a significant part of the book's content. But I also thought, sort of for me, it sort of sums up Liverpool a little bit. Like, it's like the way people think about Liverpool. It's like, oh, they're off it goes again. It's going off again. That sort of thing. And I just like I love the song. It's one of my favourite songs, I've got to be honest as well. So, like, I remember in the Europa League final in 2016 in Basel, I was covering that game for the Independents, and it was one of the many letdowns in finals over the last sort of 10 years. But at half time, one of the great moments. So I'll always remember this. Like, always remember it, even though Liverpool lost the final. Like, Liverpool 1-0 up at half time, and There She Goes starts playing on the PA system. And Google it, go onto YouTube if you can find it. Like, all the fans of Liverpool then just started singing it. And honestly, it was just amazing atmosphere inside the ground. And I just remember thinking, you've got to win now, surely. There's no way they're not going to win. And it was 1-1 within I think 60 seconds of the half time, the second half starting. So, it's always been a song that like I've sort of liked, So for a few reasons, I mean, I could have called it a few other. I had a few other names, but to be honest, my wife just came into me. I was agonising over it, and she just said, "You've got to call it that." So I was like, "Well, yeah, got to do it now, haven't I?"
Oh, they're a great band, the Lars. I wish they would have put out more albums, but cast as well. Yeah. So yeah, brilliant. Want to ask your opinion? We've got for the first time a world-class midfielder in Thiago, and obviously you watched the match.
Bit harsh on some of the players he got. Go on. Sorry.
I know, but it just seems like it been playing for Liverpool for like 5-6 years. When he came on, he just seemed to settle the team, and like we were talking with Chris with Redman, everybody was wanting to give him the ball. Yeah, just do your thing. And now with Jota coming in, this team just solidifies like a winning mentality finally. What's your thoughts on bringing those two key players in now?
Yeah, well, I think, I've mentioned this on another podcast, so I apologise and repeat myself, but I think with Thiago, one of the sort of the big challenges for Liverpool in a football world where there's no fans inside the stadium is that opposition managers find it a lot easier to just basically park the bus and try and hit them on the counter attack and hope that they might get something out of the game. And that happens a few times, after football started up again. You can make excuses for Everton. It was the first game back, and people were still finding a way. But then I suppose you can make excuses for Arsenal as well, but because they'd obviously not long clinched the title. But I think that I do think that that's going to be a bit of a challenge for Liverpool, where teams are going to find it easier to not attack them because there isn't going to be the demand inside the stadium. There's no way that like sort of Chelsea could have played that way. Sorry, my wife just came in there. There's no way that Chelsea could have played the way they played if Stamford Bridge was packed. There's just no way they could have done that. So I think what Thiago does in a very practical sense is it means that Liverpool are going to have more possession, than they probably have had. And they have a lot anyway, but I think they're going to have more possession, and he is going to bring a level of quality on the ball that they haven't had. So yeah, I was really excited when his name first started, appearing really with Liverpool, and we were quite lucky. I say everything's a bit of luck, isn't it? But the Athletic broke the story that they'd agreed a fee with Bayern Munich on Thursday morning. I was up early on Thursday morning because my daughter was howling for food, and my phone started ringing at like 6:30 in the morning. So for the next 3 hours, I think we broke the story at 9:30. It was a bit of a collective effort between a number of writers. Really, I don't think any one person wants to take any credit for it for some reason, but. Yeah, so it was just a really exciting moment. I felt, because Liverpool have never really signed that profile of player, in my lifetime. It's not the profile that excites; it's just his ability. I just think he's just top class, isn't he? He's watching him play for Bayern Munich. Nobody could get near him, and you can just see with the pace and the speed around him. Those players, as you said, sort of everybody was just looking towards him straight away, wasn't it? It was just like. Give him the ball, just give him the ball and let him do it. And I actually thought he could have played a little bit better, to tell you the truth. If I'm being hypercritical, but you can just tell straight away, that he's just top class. And I just think he's going to push this Liverpool team onto a level that that we haven't seen before. I really do. I think he's going to be incredible signing for Liverpool over the next few years. Really exciting. He seems like a really nice, really decent bloke as well. I mean, I've had a few dealings with people around him, and he's got good people around him who some of these sort of higher profile footballers. That's not always the case, but you can imagine he's going to go into the dressing room and mix well with the lads who are playing for Liverpool, because I think that's the one thing that people really underestimate, and it really brought it into focus against Chelsea. Chelsea have signed a lot of players this summer, and they're going to have to find a way of playing pretty quickly. Liverpool have been playing this way for a long time now, and the squad, the harmony between the players is really tight. So yeah, I think that he'll just fit right in there, and I'm just really disappointed that people aren't going to be able to see him live inside Anfield. I think there'd be a great deal of satisfaction watching him play, because he's just top class. Even my dad this morning, my dad sort of doesn't have that, I suppose, knowledge of European football, that a lot of people have now, because he sort of just focuses on Liverpool. But he obviously knew about Thiago, but he phoned me up this morning saying, oh my God, he said he's Paul was glued to his feet, wasn't he? Just loves him straight away. So yeah, I just think one of those great signings for Liverpool. I think he'll become an absolute hero.
It's funny, Simon, that I saw a picture this morning of Thiago with all his medals and plates and everything, and it took up the whole screen, all the honors that he's won, over the past 10 years of playing with Barcelona and Bayern. And you feel like, because we mentioned team chemistry, I think that it's easily being able to integrate somebody like that has a proven track record of success versus, say, a Werner who wants to come in, be a starter right away, is on higher wages than everyone, So, yeah, we've always said team chemistry for Klopp is such a huge factor in the success of his teams.
I think so, yeah. I think you're right. I think the big thing is that he's got the level of experience where, we've seen players sign for Liverpool over the last few years, and Klopp's taken, a bit of time to put them into the team and for them to really start, blossoming, really. Still waiting for Naby Keita to do it, I think. But he, with Thiago, I mean, I don't think he even had a training session, did he, with the team, and put him on at half time with the score 0-0. I know they've got the one-man advantage. I mean, that was obviously big. That Chelsea just couldn't get near him, could they? It's always going to be difficult for them with the extra one man down. But I just think that you would expect him to come in and have an impact straight away. A player of that age and experience, I don't think he's going to find it hard, really, to adjust to Klopp's expectations, really. Because I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because I think there are parallels between Klopp and Guardiola in terms of the expectations that they have on players and the commitment to training. You saw how Gundogan went from Borussia Dortmund saying, "I never want to work with Jurgen Klopp again. He's he's off his head. Basically, asked for too much." Went and worked for Guardiola, and then there's a similar sort of parallel with Thiago. They almost want to sort of have that manager, but I don't. It must be draining for the players from time to time. I think for the teammates, you mentioned the teammates. I think straight away, it feels like he's coming in to make them better, and they'll know that they'll all the Liverpool players. They watch football. They're not like a team that isn't interested in football. Sometimes you see footballers and they're not that bothered about football. They don't watch it. All these players, they'll have played against Thiago. They know what a good player he is. And as I said, they were just looking towards him straight away to basically go and do the damage yesterday. And I just thought that was really telling.
It's funny because of that perspective, because it's like you just mentioned, they had the level of trust like right away. And it takes me back to when Minamino first started playing. It seemed like the players wouldn't pass it to him even when he was wide open. They didn't have that level of trust. And then here's a guy that basically just put down his Mai Tai and got off the beach, and he's already on the pitch, and is after half a training session, and then they're already looking for him, and And he didn't even get out of first gear, in my opinion. Still.
No, he didn't. I mean, as I said, I actually, you know, he's a bit wayward at times, and obviously gave away the penalty. That shouldn't be forgotten, really. Yeah. But I think that it's just the way he holds himself.
It's a dive.
It's a balance. It's the way he sort of moves across the pitch. He's just got that grace and balance, and just relentless, isn't he? Just passing. And I mean, I wrote the other day about like that there are some comparisons I think to be made with Xabi Alonso, in the sense that I remember when, you know, speaking to Jamie Carragher about this period where Alonso comes in and everybody's watching him, you know, intently, like what's he going to be like, sort of thing. And he said within 10 minutes, everybody was just like, give him the ball, because he's gonna hurt you. And I think the great thing about this is obviously Thiago's a slightly different player. I don't think he's got like sort of the long range passing. It's more sort of middle distance passing and shorter range. But I think that he has that vision, you know, that he sees the gaps, and you know, he's the player that I think the midfielders are going to look to. I must say though, I mean, I do think Jordan Henderson for me has been brilliant over the last 18 months. I just think he's been incredible, and his first half performance was very impressive. I thought, you know, I know Liverpool didn't score, but he looked like a man who knows that he's going to have to perform to stay in the team. But I think all the midfielders do. But knowing the way he is and the way he his desperation to be successful, you know, I think that's the other great thing. I think when you've signed a player and you've just won everything that Liverpool have won, and you see that, you don't want that player to take your place. So your levels rise again, your attention sharpens, you know, and you could see that about Liverpool's performance, you know, against Chelsea. I think that'll continue over the next few weeks. I think there's so much excitement about Thiago. I don't think it's only in the amongst the fan base. I think it's amongst the players as well.
Well, Simon, I know our time's like come to an end. I really do appreciate you coming on. Like I said at the beginning, you know, I've wanted you to get you on for a long time, and you know, Steve's a big admirer, so I appreciate you know, coming on, and please, everyone, you know, check out Simon's books and also his articles on The Athletic. So again, cheers for coming on.
No worries. Thanks for inviting me. Brilliant.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon. Appreciate it. Keep up the good work, and good luck on your rehab on your Achilles.
Nice one, yeah. Let's hope. Thanks, guys. Yeah,
cheers.
anytime. Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
Take care. Good luck with everything.
Cheers, mate.